Unit 4 factories come up. First cotton mill in Bombay in 1854. By 1862, 4 mills. Jute mill in Bengal in 1855 and another one 7 years later in 1862. In North India, the Elgin mill in Kanpur in the 1860s and a year later the first cotton mill of Ahmedabad. By 1874, the first spinning and weaving mill of Madras began production. Who set up the industries? Where did the capital come from? Who came to work in the mills? The early entrepreneur. Industries were set up in different regions by varying sorts of people. Let us see who they were. The history of many business groups goes back to trade with China from the late 18th century. Let me tell you the story of British trade with China. The English East India Company was buying tea from China for sale in England. As tea became a popular English drink, this created a problem. England at this time produced nothing that could be easily sold in China. So, in such a situation, how could Western merchants balance their trade? They could buy tea only by paying in silver coins. So, to stop this loss of silver, they searched for a commodity that could sell in China. Opium was such a commodity. However, it was known for its medical properties and used in small quantities for certain types of medicines because the Chinese were aware of the dangers of opium addiction. And the emperor had forbidden its production and sale except for medicinal purposes. But Western merchants in the mid 18th century began an illegal trade in opium. So while the English cultivated a taste for Chinese tea, the Chinese became addicted to opium. Where did the capital come from? As already discussed, most of the capital came from the trade and cotton shipments. Some merchants from Madras traded with Burma, while others had links with the Middle East and East Africa. There were some commercial groups which were not directly involved in external trade but involved only in internal trade, like carrying goods from one place to another, banking money, transferring funds between cities, and financing traders. When opportunities of investment in industries opened up, many of them set up factories. Now, problems faced by Indian merchants when the colonial control over Indian trade tightened. Number one, the market within which Indian merchants could function became limited. Number two, Indian merchants and traders were barred from trading with Europe in manufactured goods and had to export mostly raw materials and food grains, raw cotton, opium, wheat, indigo. Then, with the entry of modern ships, Indian merchants were edged out of the shipping business. Till the First World War, European managing agencies in fact controlled a large sector of Indian industries. Three companies, Bird Higglers and Company, Andrew Yule and Jardine Skinner and Company, were the most important European managing agencies. These agencies mobilized capital, set up joint stock companies, and managed them. In most instances, Indian financiers provided the capital while the European agencies made all investment and business decisions. The European merchant industrialists had their exclusive chambers of commerce. Where did the workers come from? Factories needed workers, and with the expansion of factories, this demand increased. In most industrial regions, workers came from the districts around. Over 50% workers in the Bombay cotton industries in 1911 came from the neighboring districts of Ratnagiri, while the mills of Kanpur got most of their textile hands from the villages within the district of Kanpur. Most often, mill workers moved between the villages and the city. Over time, as the news of employment spread, workers traveled great distances in the hope of work in the mills. But getting job was always difficult. Even when mills multiplied and the demand for workers increased, the numbers seeking work more always than the jobs available. Entry into the mills was also restricted. Industrialists usually employed a jobber to get new recruits. The jobber was an old and trusted worker. He got people from his village and showed them jobs, helped them settle in the city, and provided them money in times of crisis. The jobber therefore became a person with some authority and power. He began demanding money and gifts for his favor and controlling the lives of workers. Unit 6, Market for Goods. We have seen how British manufacturers attempted to take over the Indian market and how Indian weavers and craftsmen, traders, and industrialists resisted colonial controls. They demanded tariff protections, created their own species, and tried to extend the market for their produce. When new products are produced, people have to be persuaded to buy them. How was this done? The first way is advertisement. So, as you know, advertisements make products appear desirable and necessary. They try to shape the minds of people and create new needs. Today, we live in a world where advertisements around us, they appear in newspapers, magazines, hoardings, street walls, television screens. Okay, so if we look back into history, we find that from the very beginning of the industrial age, advertisements have played a part in expanding the markets for products and in shaping a new consumer culture. When Manchester industrialists began selling cloth in India, they put labels on the cloth bundles. It was needed to make the place of manufacture and the name of the company. But the label was also to be a mark of quality. When buyers saw made in Manchester written in bold on the label, they were accepted to feel confident about buying the cloth. But labels did not only carry words and text, they also carried images and were very often beautifully illustrated. As most of the consumers were religious minded, so images of Indian gods and goddesses regularly appeared on these labels. It was as if the association with the gods gave divine approval to the goods being sold. The imprinted image of Krishna or Saraswati was also intended to make the manufacture from a foreign land appear somewhat familiar to Indian people. By the late 19th century, manufacturers were printing calendars to popularize their products. Unlike newspapers and magazines, calendars were used even by people who could not read. They were hung in tea shops and in poor people's homes just as much as in offices and middle class apartments. And those who hung the calendars had to see the advertisements day after day through the year. In these calendars, images of gods and goddesses were used to attract the consumers. Along with the images of gods, figures of important personages of emperors and nawabs were also used. The message very often seemed to say, if you respect the royal figure, then respect this product. When the product was being used by kings or produced under royal command, its quality could not be questioned. Indian manufacturers were also using the tactics. When Indian manufacturers advertised the nationalist message, it was clear and loud. If you care for the nation, then buy products that Indians produce. Advertisements became a vehicle of the nationalist message of Swadeshi. So, clearly, the age of industrialists has meant major technological changes, growth of factories, and the making of a new industrial labor force. However, as you have seen, hand technology and small scale production remain as important part of